Hi guys, Michael Abayomi here. Today, I'd like to take a look back at the final season of Game of Thrones. So it's been over 5 years since Game of Thrones came to an end, and you only need to take a glance at the Rotten Tomatoes scores to see how divisive that final season had been. We of course had people that declared it to be the worst thing ever. The writing was the butt of all the jokes. A lot of people had issues with where most of the characters ended up, and overall, it was a disappointment for a lot of people because expectations were not met. These were expectations that were set and built up over the course of the preceding seasons, and the way everything wrapped up, a lot of people were left wanting, which is fair because Game of Thrones at its heyday was actually what can be considered one of the greatest TV shows of all time. So that was based on the caliber of the writing, the acting, the production, everything added together to create this show that was unlike anything we'd ever seen. So obviously, expectations were always going to be high for that final season. And in a way, I guess the potential for disappointment was always there, because for something to be at that level of excellence for so long and create that amount of expectation, we always had that chance. There was always that slim chance that you could end up disappointing fans, or at least end up in a bittersweet manner. But all in all, despite all of his flaws, despite all of his shortcomings, I was one of those that actually came out of the show overall satisfied by all the things that had happened. Yes, there were a lot of story beats that I wish had been fleshed out more. There were a lot of characters that I wish had gotten a chance to shine better or hadn't been beholden to the demands of the plot. But I still feel that overall the season, that final season of Game of Thrones, still had a lot of redeeming qualities. And those are some of the things I'd like to go over in this video. So the main problem with the final season of Game of Thrones wasn't so much how the characters were handled or how they ended up, but more or less the way they got there. In other words, the problem was with the execution of the various story beats. Because from the moment the show surpassed the storyline of the books, people had started to have doubts whether there was going to be a decline in the quality of the storytelling. But what we were made to understand was that the showrunners, Benioff and Weiss, had obviously consulted with George R.R. Martin regarding the ending of the book, where he was planning to take all the characters, and it was based on that information that they crafted the final 3 seasons more or less. And while season 6 had given us highlights like Battle of the Bastards, and even season 7 had its own highlights as well, it was just evident that there was just something lacking. Yes, we know the show was wrapping up and all that, but still, you just couldn't escape that feeling that the whole thing felt rushed. Especially considering how truncated the final 2 seasons were, because they announced that they only had 13 episodes left of story to tell, and the final season was just 6 episodes. The one preceding that was 7. Meanwhile, we've been getting 10 episode seasons from the beginning, which gave enough time to flesh out characters, build up their backstories, develop the plots and all that. But all of a sudden, everything just felt like it was hurtling towards this destination. And while I didn't have a problem with the destination itself, once again, my main issue with the final seasons was how we got to that destination, the abrupt nature of the final 2 seasons, more or less. And my biggest overall grievance, looking back at the whole show now, was how the whole resolution to the White Walker threat was handled. I mean, this was a threat that from the very first episodes, literally episode 1 opened with members of the Night's Watch on the run, trying to run for their lives from these mythical creatures that we didn't have any idea what they were. From that very moment, from that very episode, from the very beginning, it was clear that these guys were being positioned as the primary antagonist of the show. We now get to season 8, and the entire conflict with the White Walkers, despite all the mystery surrounding it, despite all the build-up, everything was just resolved within the span of a single episode. Granted, it was a long, epic battle that lasted 1 hour, 30 minutes or thereabouts, but still, this is something that you've been building up for so long, and you'd already given us this impression that it's going to be this kind of epic showdown. Because when we go back to Hard Home, season 5, episode 8, and you remember the ending, how it ended with this stare down between Jon Snow and the Night King. That was obviously setting up something big. That was setting up this epic confrontation between the two of them, only for us to get to episode 3 of season 8, The Long Night, and you just see that nothing was playing out the way it was supposed to. Despite bringing Jon Snow back from the dead, you'd have thought that you brought him back from the dead for him to serve a purpose Because by this point, it was already clear that Jon Snow had been positioned as the main hero of the show. But then again, as much as he was positioned as the hero, he hadn't really been given a chance to shine on his own. Like if you look at all his other accomplishments, like all the other battles he was in, all of it was actually won through the actions of 11th hour heroes that came to save the day at the last moment. So Jon Snow hadn't really gotten his shining moments. And this was supposed to be that moment. This was supposed to be what they've been building up towards. This was supposed to be the reason why he was brought back to life in the first place. And only for the episode to play out the way it did, and you have Arya Stark flying in from nowhere to kill the Night King. I guess it was all in the name of subverting expectations, but none of it ended up satisfying anyone. Because yes, nobody saw Arya Stark flying from the mist to come and stab the Night King, but still, you have to look at the overall results, and the results were just a very big letdown for everyone. What we deserved, what should have happened was that we should have gotten like at least one proper fight between the Night King and Jon Snow. It doesn't matter if Jon Snow even lost, but at least let him go down in a blaze of glory or something. Give him that heroic moment for him to finally be able to stand on his own and confront this threat and actually either give his life to bring it to an end or at least play a pivotal role in ending the threat. So yeah, that was one of the biggest letdowns for me, one of my biggest grievances overall. And there were just a lot of like little issues like that sprinkled throughout this season. We had characters acting in uncharacteristic ways. For example, somebody like Tyrion Lannister, who had been built up as one of the smartest characters. He was always the smartest person in the room. All of a sudden, because the plot demanded that they should be left in the dark, just find him making all manner of decisions that didn't really pan out, that didn't really make any sense. So little things like that were just the things that aggravated me the most. But in terms of what people complain about, primarily like the turn with Daenerys becoming the Mad Queen, or even how characters like Jaime and Cersei didn't really get satisfactory deaths. Personally, I don't have any issues with any of those things, because concerning the Mad Queen, concerning Daenerys, it had been telegraphed for quite a while that this was the direction she was headed. Like, it was made obvious that she might not actually be the protagonist or the hero a lot of us were assuming she was going to be. So that's, personally, I don't have any issue with how that's wrapped up or how it was handled. Yes, I guess if they had done a few more episodes, we would have given it more time to breed, more time for us to actually accept that she was truly becoming this Mad Queen. But because of how abruptly the whole thing ended, like one moment she torches the entire King's Landing, and I just have to say that that was one of the most satisfactory moments in the course of the entire show, because there was just this sense of satisfaction I had watching her riding with her dragon and torch King's Landing. Not that I'm like a sadist, I just want to see everything burn, but you have to understand that King's Landing is a place that represents the worst of society. Like, this is the same people that cheered when Ned Stark was having his head cut off, the same people that cheered when Cersei was being paraded naked through the streets. So I felt that they all deserved to burn, more or less. And I was actually satisfied to see it finally play out the way it did. But as I was saying, you had that moment happen and she becomes the queen, only for within minutes of the final episode, Jon Snow comes and kills her, and the whole thing just felt rushed. We never really got time to digest any of it, and that was just one of the main reasons why all of it didn't go down as well as it should have. Because if you look at it on paper, all of it felt fine. All of it looked like, okay, I could see this happening. This could actually play out this way. But it was just in the execution once again. Even Bran becoming the king at the end of the day, even that felt logical in my opinion, because they made a case for why he was an ideal candidate for king. Personally, I was never really shipping the whole Jon Snow becoming the king, especially considering how adamant he had been that he didn't really want it. He didn't really want the throne. He had been against it all along. So personally, I didn't feel Jon Snow was a better candidate overall, but case they made for Bran with his abilities and everything, fine. It might not be to everybody's taste, but for me, I felt it was still an okay decision. So I didn't really have much problem with that. Even Jon Snow walking off with the wildlings into the north to go and live out the rest of his days, that also felt like an appropriate ending to his story, because when you look at it, he had more or less come to accept those people as his family. All the time he spent with them, his feelings for Ygritte and all of that, all that baggage still hanging from his past and all that. It just made sense that he would make that kind of decision to just go out and live out the end of his days. One detail that I felt they glossed over was when they brought him back to life, the expectation there was that there was going to be some kind of repercussions or some kind of effect on him as a person. Because when you look at other characters like Beric Dondarn, who was also brought back to life, he obviously made it clear that it takes a toll, that each time he's brought back, like he comes back less than he was the previous time. But we just never really get to see this in Jon Snow's characterization after he was revived. And I guess this is the only point where I actually felt that he had that deep-rooted sadness in him and he just wanted to go and live out a quiet life somewhere with the wildlings. This aspect of the character could have been shown more and fleshed out more, but overall, concerning where he ended up, I'm perfectly fine with how that particular plot thread ended. But another character that I would say I had mixed feelings with how they ended up was Arya Stark. Because Arya Stark from the beginning was one of my favorite characters. Some of my favorite pairings in the show involved her, like the whole stretch where she was with the Hound, riding through the countryside, trying to survive and all that. Even when she was the cupbearer for Tywin Lannister. Those are some of my favorite exchanges in the whole series. Like, there's just something about her and what she brings out in other characters, and I really enjoyed seeing all those aspects of the character. And I just felt that her arc was one of the toughest ones to stomach, because there was this stretch where she was undergoing this training with the faceless people, and that stretch was just one of the most tedious moments of television we've had to endure. And despite enduring all that, you would have thought that all of that would amount to something meaningful. And the only thing we got out of it was she used her powers to seek revenge on the Freys, and that was it. Like, all that training, all of that for nothing. Yes, personally, I like the way they ended with her deciding not to let the quest of vengeance to consume her when she was with the Hound, and the Hound doesn't want her to end up like him. I liked all that. I liked the juxtaposition between the two characters and how she finally realized that the quest for revenge isn't the be-all end-all. So I liked that aspect, but I just felt that the whole struggle she went through, undergoing the training to learn how to change faces and all that, should have been utilized in a more meaningful way in the context of that final season. So I just felt that that didn't really work, in my opinion, even though I liked where her character ended up and the fact that she's still out west of Westeros or wherever she's sailing to. I like the aspect, it tracks with the character and all that, but still it could have been handled in a better way. So that's another issue that I kind of had with this final season. But like I said, overall, looking at it as a whole, like, the show obviously had a lot of issues at the end, but overall, especially when you look at all the accolades it received, you can definitely tell that this was a show that was above and beyond everything else around it. And now that we're 5 years removed from the whole debate and the whole clownery that was going on around the show from back then, looking back at the whole show as a whole, I feel it was a valiant effort overall. It was flawed, but definitely a valiant effort, and it should definitely go down in history as one of the better shows we've had the privilege of getting to experience. Anyway, these are just my thoughts about the final season of Game of Thrones. Do you have any gripes or hot takes of your own that you'd like to share? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed watching this discussion, or to subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more discussions like this in the future. And until the next one, this is Michael, signing off.